working on communication is so important, because then you're able to talk to people, you're able to get them more interested, able to pull them in and just teach them about why this matters. I mean, we can tell them facts, and you can look up, an information page for a species, but helping them understand why you care about it, why that animal is important to you, and why you feel that animal is important to the bigger picture of the ecosystem, that's the kind of stuff that's going to kind of fuel people.
Hello and welcome to the Dragon Tree Podcast, the show where we talk to great communicators about how they do what they do. I'm your host, Chris Hobson, and today we're speaking with Kimberly Curren. Kimberly is a naturalist in the Calvert County Government Department of Parks and Recreation in Maryland in the Natural Resources Division. Her main focus as a naturalist is bringing the public into touch with the natural world and enhancing their appreciation of it. It's great talking to you today, Kimberly.
Thanks so much for having me.
We're so delighted to have you. Can you begin by telling us what drew you to becoming a naturalist and an educator?
Sure. I always wanted to be an educator. I think when I was growing up, and I played a lot of sports growing up, and I started coaching at a very young age. When I was in high school, I started coaching and doing swim lessons and things like that. And I always really enjoyed just working with people and teaching and kind of seeing their progress and things like that. So I always knew I wanted to teach. It took me a really long time to find my path within that. I started out focusing on a lot of formal education. When I was in college, I did elementary education for a while, and I did a couple of different subject areas within secondary education. And then after I graduated college, it really still didn't feel like the right fit for me to be in a classroom. So my first position out of college was at an aquarium. I took a job as a tour guide at an aquarium. And that was an amazing position. It was a great opportunity to get to do education, but in a much more informal way. And I was there for about 10 years, and that was up in New Jersey. And when I moved back down to Maryland, we really don't live close to that many aquariums or zoos. So I was sort of poking around looking for something else, and I stumbled upon an internship with Natural Resources in Calvert County. And that was my first experience really doing fully outdoor education, nature-based education. And it just hit me like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Just being able to be outside every day was so good for my personal mental health and even my physical health. I felt such a energy boost from that. And getting to do what I love doing, which is teaching and educating, but doing it outdoors and being able to focus on nature and science, which is something that I really love anyway, it really was just the perfect fit for me. So, and luckily they've kept me around.
Right. Well, we'll talk about how you've managed to kind of draw the classroom out into the environment. That's actually how I met you, was on a kind of a bird banding expedition. I've been on a couple of them now, actually, with you and your team. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it's not just about birds. Like you hinted at, you have an experience in aquariums. And so we'll talk about a range of animals here today. But first, I was wondering if we could, one through line of this podcast is talking to communicators and kind of how their approach. So I'm wondering if you can talk about, what communication methods, just to set the stage for our discussion, what kind of communication methods does your team use to get students and volunteers, for that matter, excited about helping the environment?
Yeah, I think, looking at me and my team, we all have a different teaching style. I think everybody brings their own traits to the table when they're teaching. For me personally, I tend to just I like to be authentic in my teaching voice. I go into every program fully understanding that there are some people who are really excited about this and really want to be here and they're passionate about it. And then there are other people that nature is not really their thing. And there are some things in nature that make people uncomfortable. And I fully accept that. And I like to go into it just kind of hoping to do anything I can to make them a little bit more open to the experience. And again, I try to validate everybody's experiences and everybody's feelings coming into things and make them feel safe and make them feel like they're understood and meet them where they're at. So that's really where I come at it. That's the perspective that I like to come in with. And, some people have really big personalities and have a lot of bubbly energy. And there's other people who just have like Gene is a great example of somebody who just has such detailed information about his area of expertise that he's really interested in, like just details that you could talk to him for hours about. And he'd never run out of information or cool things to say about it.
We actually talked to Gene about a year ago, actually. So if anybody's watching and wants to know more, please
Yeah,
go
definitely
back
go back
and watch the episode.
and listen to Gene. He's such a wealth of information, especially as when it pertains to birds. He's our resident bird nerd, and and I really just try to come at my education from a genuine authenticity. Like, let's give this a try. What do we think? How are we feeling about this? This is something that I think is cool. I hope that you'll think it's cool too, and just try to move the needle in that way. Some of our programs that are geared towards young kids, their parents sign them up for things really just because they need something to sign their kid up for, especially in the summertime. So it's not always the way we envision it in our minds, that like these kids are signing up for hiking camp. They must be kids that really
Right.
love hiking. And
Yeah,
sometimes
exactly.
it's really just, well, they needed somewhere to put their kid for the week. So they're going to hiking camp.
Mhm.
And like you mentioned, the school field trips, that's like a mandatory part of their curriculum. So whether they like it or not, they have to be there. But yeah, we're very lucky that we do a lot of public programming also, where we get people coming out for our programs that do genuinely want to be there and they're fully invested in it and they want to do all the things. So it's really interesting. It's really cool to get to work with that population as well.
Yeah, and I have to imagine the sheer variety of what, in terms of nature, that you all focus in on, and just the spectrum there really helps provide a hook for a lot of people. And one of those animal populations that you do kind of focus in on is the dragonfly population, which I thought was so interesting. And the fact that that animal species is a good gauge of pollutants in the environment. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's something a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, so I run a citizen science based research project. I don't run the research project. We do it in conjunction with National Park Service. It's called the Dragonfly Mercury Project. And what that project does is it samples dragonfly larvae. So a lot of people actually don't realize dragonflies begin their life as an aquatic insect. So much in the same way that frogs begin as tadpoles, dragonflies begin their life underwater. They oftentimes spend several years as an underwater, fully aquatic insect underwater. And because they spend the first several years of their life underwater, and they've become a really good indicator for mercury within the environment. So, what we're able to do is myself, usually some other staff, and hopefully some citizen science volunteers that are interested can come out to the park and we sample for dragonfly larvae. So, we'll use dip nets to scoop out larvae. They have to be of a certain size in order to be analyzed at the lab. So, we have to measure them and we have to identify them down to the family level. And once we identify them and bag them up, we send them to National Park Service and they analyze them in the lab and they'll send us a report about how our parks are doing in terms of mercury pollution based on analyzing the dragonfly larva. It's a really fascinating project and it's a great opportunity for the community to get involved in actual hands-on science. And we have been doing it for many years now. We've been doing it probably at least 5 or 6 years. And we try to switch sites because we don't want to take all the dragonfly larvae from one site year after year after year. Eventually, that's going to harm the local population. So we do try to switch up where we're sampling from every year. But it's been a really, really great project for us to be a part of.
I really like the practical aspect of that. I mean, dragonflies are just cool,
Yeah.
and so I'm sure there's a fair amount of people who are just interested from the aesthetic kind of point of view.
Hmm.
But the additional bonus of that you're kind of monitoring the environment, trying to help the environment, I
Right.
think is really compelling. And we'll talk in a minute about horseshoe crabs, which again I did not realize this. Another good. I guess barometer or just kind of like a milestone marker of how the what preys on them, the
Right.
populations of birds that prey on them are actually doing. But we'll come to that in a minute. But I kind of wanted to first ask you about a crab monitoring program that I know you're hoping to begin soon. So I'm wondering, what is the origin of that project? And, I guess, how do you monitor crabs, and like what information either have you collected so far or do you hope to collect?
So, the reason why that really made me want to start doing that is because when I lived in New Jersey, when I worked at the aquarium in New Jersey, I was given the opportunity to take part in some horseshoe crab research. And basically, what they're doing with horseshoe crab research in many places is just count surveys. So, a count survey being just walking a selected strip of beach where horseshoe crabs tend to come up and do their spawning, and getting a population count. So there's a lot of different protocols that are already in place for projects that do that. But in the area where we are in Southern Maryland, there really aren't any overarching official projects that are set up yet, at least not currently. So I'm hoping with natural resources to be able to start that. We've had a lot of interest from the public that are they feel very connected to horseshoe crabs. They're a local species that people see when they're out walking the beach in the springtime, and they want to help them. They talk to us all the time about how they notice less crabs now than they did when they were kids, and they want to know how they can help and what they can do. And that's why we've found that as nature educators, people are very interested in science, and they're very interested in hands on being able to help do research. So we're hoping to break down the barrier that research isn't just for universities and, lab students behind doors, that people, the general public, can help with it as well. So that's really why I'm hoping to get started on just a basic population count for our beaches that are known to have horseshoe crab populations.
Well, you're out there in Calvert County. Are we talking the Chesapeake Bay when you say beach,
Yes.
or other places? Okay,
Yep.
mostly Chesapeake.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and I guess building on that, to the point of the practicality of it, this was news to me that the birds feed on the is it the eggs of
Yes.
the horseshoe crab that
Hmm.
these certain bird species feed on.
Yeah.
So and maybe you can talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of what species that is and how that works. If you could also talk about, is that an occasion where you would collaborate with ornithologists or other professionals to kind of compare notes? Or,
Right.
I mean, I know you yourself are an ornithologist to a degree. I know you've got Gene right there, but is there a certain degree of collaboration between departments on something like that?
I would imagine so. The famous bird that relies heavily on horseshoe crabs is the red knot. And the red knot
Okay.
is this little shorebird that's very cute. And it has one of the longest migrations in the animal kingdom. It migrates from the southern tip of South America all the way to the Arctic. And
Wow.
one of its stopover points is the Delaware Bay, which
Okay.
is up in, Delaware and southern New Jersey area.
Hmm.
And that is sort of the mecca of horseshoe crab spawning. That is where they come in just huge numbers to do their spawning. And every female horseshoe crab lays a clutch of like 4 or 5 thousand eggs at a time, and they'll
Okay.
lay several of those clutches throughout a spawning season. So, I mean, just millions of eggs up on the beaches. And that's what the red knots are using. Those eggs are very nutritious, they're very fatty. So, they're using those to bulk themselves up to finish the rest of their migration up to the Arctic. And the red knots, though, do not stop over here in Calvert County. So the red knots have been a huge advantage to those of us that love horseshoe crabs, because when it comes to like government funding and getting laws passed and things like that, I hate to say it, but the bird community has a lot more pull than the ocean-based invertebrate community does. So the fact that the declining horseshoe crab population was having an effect on these red knots actually was really helpful for the horseshoe crabs, because it got a lot more protections put on them. So now, like, their harvesting numbers have been limited, and the horseshoe crabs are used for medical testing and things like that. And there's been limitations put on that as well. And that's all thanks to the red knot. Even though the red knot doesn't stop over in southern Maryland where we are, it has trickled down and still had an effect. So now, now that a lot of people know about that, about how the eggs have an effect on that bird's migration, there's still local shorebirds that eat those eggs where we are. It's just not that bird specifically. But yeah, all the, any shorebirds that we have locally here, any gull species and things like that, they're looking to eat horseshoe crab eggs as well. So it still is affecting them. And the fact that that bird specifically there's a huge like campaign push to help those red knots not lose their main food source, which is those horseshoe crab eggs, has been really good for the horseshoe crab population as well.
Yeah, because and I think it's evident by what you're saying, but in a it's actually an August 2025 article in the Washington Post. It's just great timing. It was talking about how that population of horseshoe crabs have been declining.
Hmm.
Are you kind of saying it's evened out, or maybe even increasing because of the political pull of the bird community?
Yeah, I was under the impression that they were starting to bounce back. They certainly, I think, have bounced back from about like 30 years ago or so. Well, actually, gosh, what year are we in? Maybe even 50 years ago, like
Oh
the
gosh,
1970s.
long
Um,
trend.
they were we were just harvesting them almost to extinction. I mean, it was really out of control. I don't think anybody gave a second thought to horseshoe crabs. And so they certainly, I think, have come back a little bit since then, but there's always more work to be done. We're still not close to what their population probably should be, or what it had been historically before harvesting had started. I would say it's still nowhere close to that, but I think there has been an improvement. I do a horseshoe crab camp out program every year, which is a
Oh,
chance for folks to come out and camp out on the beach during horseshoe crab spawning. And they get to walk the beach and see them come up. And even just in me doing that year to year, seeing kind of the difference in numbers that we're getting, I really just want to have it on paper. Like me, I'm very excited by science and by data. So I really would love to just be able to look at numbers and put it into a chart and see what the changes are and things like that. So, and I think, again, I think a lot of the public is interested in that information as well. So I'm excited to hopefully get started on that for this coming spring.
yeah, I think we're at the point now as a society where we got a critical mass of people who understand the visualization of data. So
Hmm.
it's good
Right.
timing. But your work isn't just limited to that. So you also study, as I understand it, reptiles, amphibian populations, such as salamanders, frogs, toads. So you talked about like at night is a good time to kind of observe horseshoe crabs.
Hmm.
When would the best time to observe be? When would be the best time to observe and collect data on some of those species I mentioned, like salamanders, frogs, toads? And I guess secondarily, how is that information collected and used later in kind of a practical way, if at all?
Yeah, it really is going to depend on what the species is, and not even just the species, but specifically what is it that you're trying to study. So, if you're trying to study population growth in spotted salamanders, they lay their eggs in the springtime. So, that's going to be when you're going to be monitoring for spawning and monitoring egg masses and things like that. Um, and that is a project that we have worked on in the past. We've done counts for spotted salamanders and marbled salamanders. I've run a program the last few years for redback salamanders, which is actually a fall and a spring project, because that's just when they're moving from breeding grounds to the water and back. And so it's really just going to depend on the species. I also run a citizen science project called Frog Watch. And what Frog Watch is monitoring is actually the different local frog and toad species. And it's just a way to monitor what species there are that are present in the environment around you and when they start calling. So in frogs, frogs and toads, the males are the only ones that call, and they only start really calling when they're ready to start mating. So they're calling females in. And so we start monitoring for frog calls usually in March, sometimes even in February, but every species is different. So, like bullfrogs, for example, are a very late summer caller. They're not going to be calling in February and March. They're going to be calling later into the summer months as it starts getting hotter. But, so every species is different. And one of the reasons why, amphibians specifically, I haven't gotten to do a lot of work with reptiles, which is very sad. I hope to change that in the near future. But amphibians are another great bioindicator of the health of the ecosystem. And it's because they have permeable skin and because,
Oh,
they begin their life in an aquatic environment. So they are taking in any of the pollutants in the environment around them. They're so much more susceptible to it. A lot of people think of frogs as, if you've ever heard the expression like the canary in the coal mine, they're able to tell us what is going on that's harmful in the environment before we would notice it, before even some of our scientific tools, no matter how sensitive they are, might be able to pick that up. So being able to listen for what frogs are calling and when they're starting to call. So as the seasons are shifting a little bit as time goes on, it's starting to get warmer much earlier in the year. We're noticing that some frog species are starting to call a little bit earlier.
okay.
And, that shows us that there's something happening in the environment that's changing. And then scientists can take that information and use that to extrapolate other things that could be going on in the environment. What is that having an effect on, or why is the environment having an effect on these animals in this way? So you can really it's such simple data that, again, anybody can collect. Anybody can go out and just listen to frogs calling. And there's a website that you can log. What frogs did you hear? How many were you hearing calling? Like, what was the date and what was the weather like? And that's it. That's all you have to know. And that tells scientists so much about what's going on in the environment. So that's another project that I really love, that so many people can have access to. I do that project on my back deck, like in the summertime. So it's just,
Interesting.
if you live close enough to any body of water that might have frogs by it, you can do it at your house. So,
Yeah, they even have like backyard bird
yep.
monitoring. We've done that before, and it was really interesting because in 2024, early 20, well, I think it was April of 2024, there was a solar eclipse.
Hmm.
It made all the headlines. We actually traveled up to Vermont for that, and as part of that, we did kind of like a citizen science thing, which is something I want to ask you a little more about. But where kind of just like what you're talking about, but with birds,
Hmm.
as the moon was going over the sun, it was so interesting to see how birds just totally changed their behavior.
Yes.
I mean, obviously the temperature dropped.
Hmm.
You could even it wasn't just the birds either. Their calls became different, but there were like sprays from like some of the vegetation. These interesting
Oh,
smells
wow.
were coming out of nowhere.
Interesting.
So yeah, I think some people feel like there's a barrier between them and nature
Yeah,
sometimes, but what you're saying, it really resonates with me that you could just step out in your backyard
sure.
and really help with some of this citizen science,
Yeah,
these
absolutely.
projects.
Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit more about I love that term, citizen scientist.
Yeah.
You've talked a fair bit about kind of things you do like in an organized way. but do you kind of deputize people or classes when they come for field trips to go out into the world and be citizen scientists
Absolutely.
on
I
their
think
own terms?
anybody who comes through our programs is encouraged to participate in citizen science. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. I mean, through Calvert County Natural Resources, we have tons of opportunities for citizen science programs where you can come in and take part in a formalized scientific study and help collect data. But, there's also tons of opportunities, even just using like an app on your phone, like iNaturalist is a great example of that. Is just where you take a picture of something that you see out in nature, you put it on the website, and now there's a record of it. And we, as naturalists, use iNaturalist all the time. If I'm trying to figure out, for example, I have a salamander program this weekend, and I wasn't really sure if, like, what are our chances that we're actually going to get to see salamanders. A great thing, a resource for me to use, is to pull up iNaturalist and see if anybody else has spotted any yet. Because I can't, unfortunately, I can't be out in nature every day looking for salamanders. As much as I would love for that to be my job, I just can't be in every place all the time. So the more people that are out there taking pictures of what they see, the more resources we have to know what's out there, what's going on in nature. It's great to see, when are people starting to see the animals show, or the plants too. It's the same thing. When are flowers starting to bloom? When are trees starting to bud? All of those things we can get from something as simple as iNaturalist, which is just an app you can put on your phone that you upload a picture. And a lot of times it goes through a couple of steps to get verified so that people know what you saw. Or eBird is another great one, for people that are really into birds. People can log birds that they hear calling or birds that they see. And again, it's something that naturalists use. We will look at things like eBird to figure out what is going on around us with birds that are migrating through, any rarity bird species that come through. It gets very exciting for us to kind of, again, talk about, why are we seeing that? What's going on? What's the change? So those are very simple things that anybody can do that can get them involved. And if you're interested in doing something that's more focused and more getting your hands more on actual data collection, then checking out local natural resources divisions or departments that are running scientific. A lot of universities are always running scientific projects, and they're usually looking for people that are willing to volunteer to help out with them as well.
We've talked about communication. We've talked about meeting people where they are.
Mhm.
What would you say some other skills are that are important, and some first steps to becoming an educator?
I think so many of the people that I work with who are effective educators have such a wealth of knowledge. It's a little bit intimidating for someone who doesn't come from a science background. I didn't heavily study science in school. I mainly focused on education. That was what I wanted my focus to be. But I'm learning as I'm doing this that so much nature education can be self-taught. There are so many resources out there that you can look up, or that, guides that you can take with you out into the field, that you can teach yourself about nature. And I mean, again, there's no amount of classes that you can take that's going to teach you every single plant that you're going to see, or that's going to teach you every single bird that you could ever hear. So I think just getting out there and experiencing it, and always being willing to add to your wealth of knowledge, being open to it, is one of the most important things. Instead of just limiting yourself to a specific knowledge base, being open to learning new things. And communication is a huge part of not just what I do, but I think anybody that wants to get into science, because what we really need to do with science is get more scientists. So, I mean, the
Right.
more scientists that we have, if we want to preserve nature around us, we need more humans to help do that. So, more humans that care about it enough to help us do that. So, working on communication is so important, because then you're able to talk to people, you're able to get them more interested, able to pull them in and just teach them about why this matters. I mean, we can tell them facts, and you can look up, an information page for a species, but helping them understand why you care about it, why that animal is important to you, and why you feel that animal is important to the bigger picture of the ecosystem, that's the kind of stuff that's going to kind of fuel people into actually putting their money where their mouth is, and taking action to help improve that animal or that plant or that ecosystem's future health.
What I've learned in the couple that I've joined you on is how amazing nature is, first of all, but also how delicate it is and how interconnected it is. And I think what arises out of that, and I'm just speaking for myself, is that you start to have an appreciation for your part in that. And I don't just mean like a negative impact that humans have, because I think that's sometimes what we're taught.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we are part of all of this. We
Absolutely.
don't stand apart from it at all.
Yes.
Were there any educators that kind of that inspired you with that sense of awe, that interconnectedness? And you talked a little bit about your educational background, but early on, were there science educators who really stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel just in this moment, having only a couple hours ago, I heard about the passing of Jane Goodall. And I think anybody who has a career in science, especially wildlife science and nature based education, her influence is felt throughout the entire nature based wildlife biology field. And a huge part of what Jane Goodall's purpose was is to teach us, like you were saying, the interconnectedness of nature and how we are part of it. Nature is not just something in the background. It's not just something that we can build more office space on top of. We're part of that. It's a community that we're a part of, and the plants and the animals that are around us are experiencing things in very similar ways to the way we experience things around us. So I think her influence just within the community of wildlife scientists is definitely has had a huge impact just on our field in general. And her being the excellent communicator that she was as well, she was such an advocate for nature and teaching people about why nature matters and why science matters. So it was a huge boost to the scientific community. For me personally, I would say without a doubt, the person who influenced me the most growing up was David Attenborough. like
That was
I
my next question. Yeah.
I mean, I grew up watching any documentary that David Attenborough was narrating, and his narration style, his communication style to me was always so authentic. That's what I have tried to replicate. I felt like he's never gimmicky, he's never, kind of feigning enthusiasm for things that and he always just felt truly fascinated by everything, by the things that he was talking about. And it just, when I remember as a kid watching those documentaries, thinking like, yeah, you're right, this is really fascinating, that is really interesting. It almost gave me permission to be excited about it and feel excited about science and animals and the weird things that are going on out there in nature. So he was a huge influence specifically to me in just making me excited about nature and feel fascinated by nature.
I don't think you can fake that enthusiasm that Jane Goodall and David Attenborough have. So,
Sure.
and it holds true. And when we go out on the trips with you all, it's like electric. I mean, you can really feel how excited you all are and inspired on a daily basis. So again, another another plug for going out with
Yeah.
Kimberly and her team. And we'll put links in the show notes for how to do just that. Um, well, as we're rounding up here, I'm wondering if kind of if we can kind of look in the rear view mirror, how have some what are some of the most rewarding and or memorable moments you've experienced in your career, whether it be educating others about citizen scientists, or just on your own, doing your own work?
I think the most rewarding thing, it's difficult in our position. Oftentimes it's sort of a love them and leave them position. We see kids for a few hours maybe, and then I
Right.
mean, sometimes we're very lucky, and sometimes we do get kids that come back program after program, year after year, and that is always really exciting. There's actually a student right now that grew up coming to our programs. He's very into birds. He had helped at our bird banding program in the summers, and now he's at Cornell doing really cool bird
Oh,
research. And it's just very exciting for us because we're actually finally getting to see the fruits of our labor. Whereas usually we
really?
don't. Usually we're really kind of just trying to work on a very small scale. But that to me is very rewarding. If I can start a program at 10 in the morning with a student who is uncomfortable around bugs and insects, and by lunchtime, they're excited about bugs and insects and they want to go out and talk about bugs and insects, or they want to catch them and look up close at them. That to me is a huge victory. And I think just because of the nature of our job, how we see kids for such short time periods, you have to embrace that. You have to just hope that eventually when they go off on their own, that and I think, there's plenty of studies that show that nature-based education does cause change in people's lives, and it does affect them in the long term. So I have to just reassure myself knowing that down the road, they could 20 years from now. We get chaperones all the time at our field trips that say, I remember doing this field trip when I was in, first grade, and it was so much fun, and here's what I remember from it. So even though I didn't teach that person, it reminds me that those kinds of experiences stick with people. So that to me is the most rewarding thing, is just knowing that what I'm doing gets carried with people throughout their life.
And the through line of that is teaching them to care about the world around them, so that because if enough people care, that's what's really going to move the needle and produce change. And that kind of plays into my last question, which is, in your opinion, what are some of the biggest environmental challenges facing the areas you work in today, or maybe even just that you're projecting into the future about?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's nothing revolutionary to say things like climate change and habitat loss. Those I think are the biggest challenges that we're facing right now, and lack of resources. As our population grows, the earth is not growing with it. So
Right.
we're running out of space, we're running out of resources. I think that's going to be, as humans, our biggest challenge in the future, is to figure out how to meet our needs in ways that are sustainable. And I think humans have been doing a really nice job of coming up with innovative ways to make our world more sustainable. There's always going to be part of the population that fights back against that pushes back against it, that is very kind of focused on the current generation, right? Like, as long as I have what I need, that's all that matters. But there are so many people out there that are thinking ahead to future generations and how we can make the world better for generations to come. And we're doing what we can when it comes to things like climate change, like trying to understand how it works and how we can maybe not put a stop to it. That I think is sort of out of our reach, but slow down the effects of it, or how we can adapt to maybe go with climate change as it starts to shift. But and then habitat loss, again, that sort of is more about, again, our population is just growing, and humans need places to live, and humans need stores to go to. And we talk in a lot of our programs, we try. I've been very lucky to work in a place where we don't focus a lot on those sort of things. We don't have a lot of programs that focus on climate change and habitat destruction and sort of the negatives of what's going on in the environment right now. We try to stay more positively focused, but there are a lot of people who do focus on that, and thank goodness we have educators out there who are really taking the helm at that, because it is important. It's something that definitely needs to be addressed. But we, even as part of, we run a third grade field trip, which is based on diamondback terrapins, and
Oh,
part
okay.
of that program, we have the kids build some, so they become like an urban planner, so they get to build like a shopping center or a hotel or something, and they're on the beach, so they're doing it like sandcastle style. So they build their hotel with all their cool amenities and things like that. And then we talk to them about how this hotel might have a negative impact on the wildlife around it and how they can change it. So humans need hotels. It's just a fact. There's so many humans and we need hotels. So you keep the hotel. How can we keep this hotel? But how can we make it a better environment, a safer environment for the terrapins or any other animals that are going to be living around it? How can you build this hotel so that it takes up less space? How can you change the lighting around it so that it's safer for the nature that is around it? So we really get them thinking about those things. Again, trying not to scare them about what is happening in a negative way in terms of habitat loss, but trying to meet them at a place where they can be thinking about it in a proactive way as a citizen, even though obviously these third graders are not the ones that are deciding how hotels are being built. But eventually they're going to be productive members of society and they're going to be in charge of making those kinds of decisions. So getting them thinking about it now in that way, I think, is really important. It's one of the most important things we can do as educators.
That's a really reassuring and optimistic note to end on. Now, if anyone wants to continue this very important conversation, where can they get in touch with you?
I'm always available via email. I'm happy to talk to anybody that has questions or that's interested in getting involved. My email address is kimberly.curren at calvertcountymd.gov. And I'm going to give it to Chris, and he can pop it into the show notes if you need it. But yeah, I'm happy to be a resource for anybody that wants to get involved or that wants to continue the conversation.
Well, thank you very much for doing that. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time, Kimberly. Have a good evening.
Thanks for having me.